Welcome into the Illini cast, and we are still abuzz over what happened in Madison Square Garden, where the Illini beat the Florida Atlantic Owls 98-89, last year's Final Four team and this year's number 11 team in the country, up until that beatdown that Illinois had on Florida Atlantic. And Sonny Verma, I know you talked about it right after the game, but what are your feelings about 24 hours after that game?
I think I'm wearing my feelings on my shirt today. I got to watch a replay of that game again today, and just kind of not to spill out the same thoughts I had yesterday, but this team has a lot more potential than I gave it credit for at the beginning of the season, and yesterday may have been the best game that we're going to play all year long when, we talk about factors, which I'm sure you and I are going to talk about later on in the show. But if that's the ceiling for this Illinois basketball team, that's a pretty high ceiling.
I mean, you look at this game right here, 98-89, and you pair that with was it a 5-point loss to Marquette? I I feel like that this is way more sustainable than what was going on, where last year you beat Texas, last year you beat UCLA. I feel like this is a more sustainable version of basketball. I know we'll get a huge test on Saturday when Illinois takes on Tennessee in Knoxville, but it just feels like how Illinois is playing with the passing ability, with the scoring ability. Pair that with the excellent defense that Illinois has had this year. I think you just got to look at this Illini team and think they are truly legit. This isn't a one-off performance. It wasn't built off the backs of one player. It's built off Marcus Domask. It's built off Terrence Shannon Jr. And then you pair that with what you get from Coleman Hawkins and other guys like Justin Harmon had 10 points in that game. I just feel like this Illinois team is really good, and I don't even think this is the ceiling of this Illini basketball team.
There's a huge difference between last year's team and this year team, and I think one of the main factors is just Terrence Shannon Jr. this year seems to accept that he is going to be the alpha guy on this team. Um, every time he steps on court, you can tell he's got the confidence that he's the best player on that court, and his put his head down and drive to the rim move. There's nobody in the country that can stop it. I don't know if there's people in the pros that can stop that move. He just how fast and powerful he is. It just reminds me of prime Derrick Rose back in the day, where it was just too big, too fast, and too strong. To quote the great Stacey King. Secondly, is Brad Underwood's always had some traditionally good defensive teams, but not like this. I think I saw second in effective field goal percentage against 2-pointers. Everyone's just playing selfless ball. His mantra of staying old or getting old and staying old works. Last year we had young freshmen who were kind of new to the college scene and trying to get theirs, whereas this year we've got veterans who understand this might be their last year in college athletics. So there's more of a team vibe, a selfless vibe. Let's just team success, and it's just been a really fun basketball team to watch.
I mean, defensively, I think I read the stat yesterday before the Florida Atlanta game. It might have changed just a touch, but where in 3-point field goals, teams are shooting like a mere 20%, something along those lines with how perimeter defense has been. So, I I mean, and especially in the Big Ten, where the shooting capabilities of our conference foes isn't necessarily the best. Yes, you'll have some one-off performances here and there by a Michigan State, by a Wisconsin, but I just look at this team and think if this is the defensive effort that you're going to get, and you pair that with an elite scorer like Terrence Shannon Jr., the sky is the limit. I know that's kind of a cliche thing to say, but I don't see how many teams can stop that. I know the Kansas game was a true exhibition where there was not the foul situation, but you win that game and you played pretty good defense against one of the best players in the country in Hunter Dickinson. And then you come out and that stay old mantra against a team that is so cohesive in Dusty May's Florida Atlantic crew who returned literally everybody. And you were able to kind of out chemistry them at times, which is kind of unreal with how many new pieces this Atlanta team has. But it just proves that guys like Justin Harmon, guys like Quincy Guerriere, guys like Marcus Domask are all on the same page, and they know that Terrence Shannon is leader, and they will do whatever it takes to be that second guy and or make Terrence Shannon Jr.'s life easier.
And I kind of echoed my thoughts all season long talking about this basketball team, that I was always kind of worried about who that second guy on this team was going to be. Who was going to be the guy who, helped Shannon. Shannon can score 20, 25 points night in and night out, but, our teams are historically not good shooters. We can't hit free throws. So someone needs to kind of alleviate the pressure off of Shannon should he have a bad game. And sheesh, that show that Marcus Damask put on yesterday in Madison Square Garden, again, in front of ESPN TV, a lot of people were talking about who is this kid. Um, that transfer, from Southern Illinois. He kind of played that booty ball that we struggled against last year. And, just seeing the guy go 15 for 21 and giving himself a couple of heat checks, and you're allowed to give yourself a heat check every now and then when you go 15 for 21. It's if Domas can be that second guy, then, again, to echo your statement, the sky's the limit.
Yeah, going into Marcus Domask, um, whenever he transferred from SIU, like I thought he was more of a role player on an Illinois roster, just simply because of the competition that is in the Missouri Valley. I didn't take into account a couple aspects that would lead to success at Illinois. Number one, Marcus was double teamed a lot as a Saluki, and justifiably so. I mean, scoring 33 points against the number 11 team in the country. And number two, there was a guy next to him by the name of Lance Jones who transferred to Purdue, who was a Mr. I'm going to shoot from near half court. There was no rhythm of the offense. So when Lance Jones had the ball, all they had to do was let him shoot that long three or double team Marcus Domask. So there wasn't too much from the second pass for Marcus Domask. And obviously, the talent at SIU isn't what it is outside of Lance Jones and Marcus Domask. When you allow Marcus to actually play as part of a team, when you have guys like Coleman Hawkins, when you have an elite athlete like Terrence Shannon Jr., when you have a drive and kick guy like Luke Goody can be, this is kind of the style of basketball that Marcus Domask wants to play, and this is kind of what he thrives in. And it's just like it just is an amazing thing to see how he was able to just dissect the matchup differences in Florida Atlantic's defense and really just do whatever he wanted. It was just awesome and fun to see.
And it's not even just his basketball ability. Watching all these games, it genuinely looks like that all these players like each other. They like
Yep.
playing with each other. Last year, I think it was right around this time, Sky Clark had struggled at the point guard position for the first stretch of games. And I think it was around mid December when all of a sudden we found out, he cleared out his apartment and he was gone from the team. And we're not really, like normally now is when you kind of hear, hey, so and so's not happy, so and so's not happy. Guys like Dane Danger, he's been struggling this year, but he's up and he's clapping and he's being a cheerleader on that bench, even despite him not being productive himself. Sincere Harris, obviously, the shock of the season so far when he decided to redshirt, but he's been in the middle of all the celebrations, the post game celebrations. It's one of those where everyone's looking around and there seems to be a cohesiveness The players, again, they bought into what Brad Underwood is selling, and that's what makes basketball fun to watch for fans like you and I. We can watch the most talented team in the world on the court, but if they're playing hero ball, if you can tell they don't like each other, it kind of rubs off on TV, and we can see it. This team enjoys playing with each other, and that makes them enjoyable to watch on TV.
And more importantly, they're accountable to each other. I don't think they want to be the odd man out. They don't want to be the weak link in this chain. And I think that's a testament to Brad Underwood's leadership as well in finding guys that can buy into the culture. Last year, I think he got enamored with the portal just a touch and with guys that may not necessarily fit a system as like a 5-star freshman. So I think this year he got guys that knew how to play a role because of their background at possibly smaller colleges. So I think this kind of template might suit Brad Underwood the best in this transfer portal world of college basketball, where you get guys from smaller colleges, where you maybe find a fit with a Power Five transfer. But I think this is kind of his way of spreading his culture, even when you don't have all 4 years to get a culture instilled.
And I don't want to speak for you, but for me, watching Brad Underwood this year has made me kind of like him even more because, as you said, he's tried all kinds of strategies over the last 3, 4 years, trying to figure out what it's going to take to build a championship team in Champaign, and he continues to try. I was actually I had this conversation with a friend of mine who's a Michigan State fan, and obviously they've got the legend, Tom Izzo, one of the greatest coaches of all time there. But there's a growing frustration, with they've started the season 4-4. He's been very stubborn, in not embracing the transfer portal, much like Dabo Sweeney in college football. And you almost run the risk of the game passing you by, and you don't really get that sense of stubbornness or complacency with Brad Underwood. He's willing to try new things. His first couple of years, he was playing that press, defense that worked in the lower levels. Obviously, wasn't working in the pros. He adjusted that. Um, as we are kind of talking about, his recruiting strategies has changed every single year to the point where it's enjoyable to me that he keeps tinkering because it shows me that he truly does care, and he's not just collecting paychecks here. And there's far more historically successful college basketball coaches who, moving forward, aren't making those decisions, and it makes me more comfortable having Brad Underwood as the guy leading the charge for Illinois.
I mean, I'm not saying that Brad Underwood is going to be Coach K or even Coach K light, but you look at the way that Coach K adapted in the one and done era of college basketball. John Calipari did it phenomenally well, but then there was a point where it didn't work for him. And I think Calipari is still struggling with how to get in this college basketball winning window. And you looked at what Coach K did. I know he didn't have to deal with the transfer portal too terribly much uh, by the time he retired, but he knew that you paired a couple 4-year starters in with some one and duns, and that's kind of the winning formula of that era. With Brad Underwood, he has adapted from that last great college basketball high school recruiting route of Kofi Coburn and Io DeSumo into this kind of realm where, yes, it might not be a 5-star basketball player that you're getting, but you're still getting a good 4-star who might stick around for a couple years to help build that culture by the time they're sophomores or maybe even juniors, that they can help assist in this this transfer, coming in, learning the program quickly and getting with the program. So I think that's kind of what Brad Underwood's mindset is, to pair the high school recruiting with the transfer recruiting, kind of like Coach K did with one and duns versus the 4-year starter.
Yeah, and as I just said, like he keeps adjusting his strategy. Like the last couple of years, we've had top 10 recruiting classes. We've done really well for ourselves there, but I think he's realized that having 4 open scholarships and having 4 high end recruits doesn't always mesh. It doesn't exactly always work and show itself on the basketball court. And with the way college basketball is run today, one guy is unhappy, they can transfer out almost immediately. Um, Now we're at the point where I think he's recruiting more for a longer term team. I think we have 5 scholarships available, but I think he's talked about only taking on like 3 recruits and leaving 1 or 2 open, knowing that the transfer portal is kind of how you build a team nowadays. And again, it's comforting for me because I have a guy in charge who is not looking backwards. He is, looking forwards. He's trying to guess what the next move is because he knows, he's got to win in March. That's the one thing that he can't quite check off on his career list yet. That's what's separating him from being in the top tier of college basketball coaches. And so, he's still hungry. And that's nice to see because, a lot of the other coaches, they seem to not, they seem to be very content now.
Yeah, I mean, you look at a guy like Amani Hansberry, like, yeah, I mean, didn't fill up the stat sheet, but he got a couple rebounds there. He played hard in his 3 minutes. That's a guy that can help build a culture going forward. That's a guy that can help establish Brad Underwood getting old and staying old. That's the kind of mentality that I think Brad is really searching for in the high school recruiting realm to pair with a guy like Terrence Shannon that you get in the transfer portal. So, I mean, I can't be anything but impressed with how Brad Underwood has adapted. And I know the term is used a lot, but adapt or die. And I think Brad Underwood adapts a lot. Sometimes it's to his own chagrin, but hey, if you're not trying to adapt, then you're going to die regardless. So I'd rather adapt, figure out what works, figure out what doesn't, and then you can go from there.
And another thing, your Amani Hansberry point, not only, yeah, he may not be playing much on the court right now, but he's being paired up with guys like Quincy Guerrier. He's watching Marcus Domask, like leaders on the team, guys who are showing him a glimpse of what having a good culture in that locker room is. So when it comes time that it's Amani's turn to be one of the main players on our team, one of the focal points, one of the leaders of the locker room, he'll he doesn't need to create a culture on his own. All he has to do is kind of maintain the culture that he experienced when he was a younger player and kind of expose the future freshmen to that. And so, again, that's also invaluable. It's I think basketball is one of the most important sports where it's genuinely important that the players like each other and that culture, locker room culture, is in tune with each other because you're constantly passing the ball to each other, just working together, this and that. If it's one of those where as long as the culture is good, it sets a floor on the team as opposed to when people actually care about each other, as opposed to when not. When basketball is also one of those sports where it's very easy just to go solo, play hero ball, go try to pad your own stats. And this Illinois team is not doing that. It's one of the most selfless teams I've seen in a long time.
And there's this huge sense of maturity with this Illini roster in terms of how they deal with certain situations. Like there were moments where Illinois stormed out to an 8-point lead, and then Florida Atlantic would climb back. Some Illini teams in the past would be like, "Uh-oh, here comes the run." Won't be able to stop it. Then boom, Florida Atlantic's up 5, and then you're wondering what the hell happened. This team, I know it helps when Terrence Shannon can do what he does and Marcus Domask is scoring 33 points, but to have some legitimate run stoppers on this Illini roster is so encouraging because in March, that's going to be elevated. And if Illinois can stop some of those runs with a 3-0 run, even on their own, with a couple baskets and a free throw in there, with a 5-0 run, 6-0 run, that changes the whole complexion of a game come March. Because once the Avalanche starts in a round of 32 game that you're not supposed to lose, that's when things can become awfully dangerous for the favorite. So, with a guy like Terrence Shannon, you become a lot less likely to be succumbed to things like that.
You're exactly right. I mean, and that's the difference of having veterans on the team as opposed to younger players. The previous game against Rutgers, we went off on a very big lead early in the game, but Rutgers made a run at the end of the first half to, close the gap up a little bit. The rack is a place we have historically struggled at. Brad Underwood was 1-5 going into last Saturday, and that game for the most part was a pretty easy win. Yeah, Rutgers made their run, but again, we brought in players who played for, yeah, maybe in lower levels, but they played in high intensity conference championships. Like they know what pressure is. And you have the Rutgers game. We talked about the game last night. You're playing in the Jimmy V Classic in Madison Square Garden against the 11th team in the country who happened to go to the Final Four last year, and oh, by the way, returned everybody on that team. You went toe to toe with them. I think you were the better team for most of that night. And not were you just the better team, but you played lights out. You shot 60% from the field. You played excellent defense. It's a confidence builder because, again, I've talked about it. Like, I don't think Brad really cares much for the regular season anymore. I think right now his main focus is getting a decent seed so that he can finally get over the hump come March. And games like last Saturday against Rutgers, games like last night in Madison Square Garden against FAU, and games like the upcoming game on Saturday against Tennessee, that type of environment, that type of like experience is what's going to set them up for what's hopefully to come in March.
I mean, this 3-game stretch, like, uh, it's just vital to Illinois' preparation in March. I mean, at Rutgers, at Madison Square Garden, in Knoxville, Tennessee, that's a gauntlet for a college basketball player, a guy that doesn't have that instinct of shutting up a road crowd or playing in the most historic venue in the world of basketball. And you're doing that back to back to back, especially in one game being a conference game. I mean, that is March epitomized, like one of those late conference games. Then you're going into a neutral site tournament game, and then you're playing a tough NCAA tournament. After that, I mean, that this 3-game stretch is just so vital for the preparation of this team.
Vital is the right word. It's I think we've kind of cleared the hurdle at this point in winning these first two games. We're kind of playing with, play money with the third game. Like if you had told us last week that we were to go 2-1 in this stretch, both of us would have taken it. There was a genuine concern we could go 1-2, or on worst case scenario 0-3. So the fact that we've gotten 2 wins already, and dare I say, like they were pretty impressive wins. It's not There's no luck involved in these 2 wins. We're a dominating win against the Rutgers, and we were the better team against FAU. It's kind of like you're playing with house money at this point, and you still want to put on a good performance against Tennessee, but now it's more trying to establish the floor of what your team can be. Like you don't want any of those performances where I remember last year on my birthday, we played Penn State, and all of a sudden we were down like 20 points in the first half, and you're like, the team didn't even show up off the bus. Like that's what you want to kind of avoid moving forward here. And I think again we keep rehashing it, but the veterans that are in that locker room now, we hope that they're setting up a culture where we're not going to see that happen anymore. Like, there's going to be good effort. And obviously, with the defense that this team is capable of playing, like, we should be in every single game from here on out.
I mean, we talked about it in the preseason. Go 500 in the stretch of Marquette, FAU, Tennessee, and Missouri. We've gotten to 1 win. We know we have the loss against Marquette. But if you're able to win against Tennessee and Missouri, I mean, then you're starting to talk about possibly a 2 or 3 seed in the NCAA tournament as opposed to the 4 or 5 seed range, because then you're really setting yourself up for success, especially in this conference play where Wisconsin should be a quality game. Michigan State's going to be a quality game. I mean, it just sets Illinois up for so much opportunity in March. I know seeding kind of doesn't matter anymore with the NCAA tournament with the way the parity structure is, but at least you're putting yourself in the right footprint to make a deep run if you take care of business against the likes of Tennessee and Missouri now in the non-conference.
And even in conference, like now, discussions are being had. Is can Illinois make a run at Purdue for the Big Ten? This those words weren't being talked about in the preseason. It was Purdue clearly ahead, Michigan State second, and then Illinois was kind of in the next tier. Michigan State's obviously struggled out of the gate. I think they're 4-4. Um, and Illinois is being talked about, like, can they challenge Purdue? I don't think we're at that level yet, but the fact that the we're even having this conversation at this point in the season would have surprised me a month and a half ago. It's again, the team is just playing good, fundamental, savvy defense. They believe in everyone on the court. Like they trust each other. Like I think we match up pretty well with Purdue if you think about it. With all the bigs that we have, a lot of these teams that we're just simply overpowering. We have a lot of bigs we can throw at ED. We have a lot of fouls we can throw at ED. And so it's a game where, I'm kind of looking forward to. I still think Purdue is the class of the conference, but I don't think they're going to be running away, from the whole thing anymore. I think, Illinois can make a solid run and at least make them sweat come to later the season.
I mean, Purdue has a loss already in conference play. Like, who would have anticipated them having a loss at this point in this early part of the game, early part of the stretch, losing to Northwestern? I think Northwestern could be ranked, obviously, in the top 25, like toward the back end of that. But still, there's so much opportunity to even upend Purdue. I mean, they still have to go through a stretch, too, of Alabama, Arizona, and then into conference play in Maryland, Illinois, Nebraska. I mean, they have their own little stretch gauntlet that where they need to prove themselves. I mean, Arizona's the number one team in the country, and I think Purdue kind of has to prepare themselves to say, "Hey, we're going to be underdogs," and I don't know how that mindset can switch from being a number one team in the country to suddenly being an underdog once again.
And it's just nice that they're going to have someone to keep them honest. Again, they're not going to run away from the conference like they did last year, where they won by like 3 or 4 games. I think we're gonna be right on their heels. I think right now we're clearly the second best team in the conference. Maybe eventually Michigan State will figure it out, but I've never seen a Tom Izzo team look this clueless. In mid December, but they've got a lot of talent on that team, and they do have historically the best coach in the conference, so maybe they'll figure it out later. But it's just right now it's all about Illinois. Illinois is kind of the talk of the conference. It's what the national media is talking about. The sleepers, Field of 68, Illinois videos and content was you know at the foremost. That's hey, who is this Terrence Shannon guy? We broke records essentially at Madison Square Garden yesterday with two guys scoring 30 points each. It's we're if Terrence Shannon can springboard this performance into an All American role. I mean, just think of how valuable that is for us moving forward when it comes to NIL and that transfer portal, and showing kind of the results of what our program is able to do with just really talented players looking to find a home.
Absolutely. I mean, you came into the season, obviously you knew that Illinois was going to be good, like where they would be a 5-4 seed kind of thing in the NCAA tournament. But this really opens up the possibilities on the horizon. But Saturday will be a test, and I think this is going to be a fun game to watch. You have a guy like Dalton Necht who has 19 points per game. They do a 7.1 rebounds per game, and then you have Ziegler at the guard position. I mean, what is your early thinking on this Tennessee Volunteers matchup?
See, the Tennessee game's going to be tough because on some nights Tennessee looks like they can win the national championship. And on some nights, I think one of their losses this year is just a loss that a program like Tennessee just should not have. This game is in Knoxville. Am I correct?
Yes, Thompson Bowling Arena.
Yeah. So, you know, I would be surprised to escape with the W. I'm not sure what the spread is yet. I didn't really look into that, but Again, it's not even now that we've got the 2 wins in the bag. I don't really need to come out of Saturday with a victory to feel good. If I see a strong performance, if I see a game, where we go back and forth and we're competing with Tennessee again in that sort of environment, and then we just fall short, I'm kind of content with that. What I don't want to see is Tennessee run us out of the building in the first half, our team turn a little lifeless, and just a blowout win. So I'll just say, we'll lose by a 5 point loss.
Here are the results of Tennessee. They beat Tennessee Tech 80-42. They beat a Wisconsin team that is suddenly showing some signs of life as a program again, 80-70. They beat Wofford 82-61, beat Syracuse 73-56. Then they came with a 3-game losing streak. They lost to Purdue 71-67. That was a home game for Tennessee. They lost to Kansas 69-60, another home game. Then they lose at North Carolina 100-92, and then they came back and beat George Mason 87-66. So they have been battle tested pretty well with
That's a
Kansas,
college. We're talking about
Purdue,
our side
and
of the ball.
Northwest. Yeah, absolutely. And
That's a
North
college.
Carolina.
Yeah.
So losing no I don't know if there's ever been a run where you've played the number 2 team in the country followed by the number 1 team in the country in non-conference play.
Yeah, as you said, they're going to be extremely battle tested, just as much as we are. So, I definitely expect a really good game. I know it's the early game on Saturday. I think 11 o'clock Central Time. So it's that's all. I just want to see a good game. I want to see two teams, similarly talented, just two coaches who are I think Underwood eventually will be a Hall of Fame coach as well. Um, I just want to see a good game, a competing back and forth, and I want to be proud of the effort afterwards. And if we're we fall short, so be it. It happens. If we win, then I don't care if I can't talk anymore. I'm coming back for a instant reaction episode again.
I am excited to see Dalton Neck go up against Terrence Shannon Jr. Dalton Neck had 37 points in their loss against North Carolina. So this is a guy that can really light up the scoreboard. And again, we talk about preparation for March. You're going to run into players that are just so immensely talented at putting the ball in the basket. And I love seeing these matchups where can what is Illinois defensively going to do against a guy like Dalton Necht? Can Terrence Shannon match the scoring output? What does Marcus Domask do in this kind of environment against Tennessee? I mean, the questions that are going to be answered, as well as questions that are going to linger on, are going to be fascinating to watch. So I am kind of with you. I think Illinois does lose this game, but the questions are just gonna be so fun to analyze, even with a loss. Like, oh man, Terrence Shannon Jr. had 27 points. Dalton Knecht had 24. But I mean, that these are the kind of fun questions and conversations that we can have from a game like this. And it'll have Brad Underwood analyze some things and figure some things out for March.
Yeah, it's gonna be a great game, and you're right. It's one of those. This might be. We just had the Marcus Domask game. This could be the Terrence Shannon game because he's been watching game tape. He's been scouting that just like you have been talking about him. So every time he steps on the court, he's usually the best scorer on the court. He's usually the best player on the court. Saturday is going to be one of the games where he's going to have a very suitable opponent, someone who can challenge his status as the best player on the court. So it'll be fun to see if he can jump up a level, if we see him take it to the next step, and take on that challenge.
This may be a bigger conversation, but I kind of want to dive in with you on this. I know it's still early on in the season, but what are your thoughts on Ty Rodgers so far at this point guard position?
We'll see. I mean, those are two different thoughts. One of my thoughts on Ty Rodgers, and then on the point guard position. I think it's really obvious he's not a point guard. Every time, and this happens multiple times, every half he dribbles and then he just gives up his dribble immediately. I have to hold my breath and hope that we can kind of get out of it. I think he's in a position where he's hasn't really been put in a position to succeed, but he's doing his best. You can see his effort on the court. He may be struggling a bit on the offensive end, but I don't think there's a better wing combination defensively than Shannon and Rogers. They are
Mhm.
two of the big reasons that our defense is as elite as they are. So, I guess technically I'll give him a B minus as a performance this year, but I still love the kid. I think he could still go down as one of my favorite Illini ever, and I just hope next year we're not putting him in the position this year on the offensive end. That doesn't really fill his skill set.
I mean, the hustle that he shows is just awesome to see. But again, offensively, I mean, he leaves you wanting so much with the scoring outputs as well. Like 0 points against Florida Atlantic, where I thought that would be a matchup where he could do that booty ball thing like Penn State, and there was nothing. Like there was no openings at all for him. I know Florida Atlantic is a decently good defensive team, but it just felt like you're playing 5-on-4 at some opportunities on the offensive side of the ball, but do you really want to take that off defensively? I mean, it becomes a quandary for Brad Underwood right now on what you do with Ty Rodgers because I feel like there are more efficient lineups out there, but it's just hard to take that off.
Yeah, but I mean, he had glimpses against Rutgers. Like, I know he didn't score that much, but some of his, like what he needs to do essentially is keep watching that Terrence Shannon film of putting your head down and running as fast as you can towards the rim. And if he can nail that, like just, that type of move where, just put your head down because almost every single time the guy guarding him is smaller than him. So if he can attack the basket and develop a touch around the rim. I think that's all we need from him this year. He doesn't need to be the focal point of the offense this year, but as long as he can develop something, so he's not a complete zero on the offensive end, that's all I'm hoping for this year at least.
Absolutely. Sonny, we talked a lot about basketball, but football continues to do little things here and there. Tip Ryman is now in the NFL draft. What's your initial reaction to that news?
I mean, I heard it was like 50-50. I know a lot of people are disappointed, and I guess I'm disappointed, but like to me, he was just maybe an average, maybe slightly above average Big Ten tight end. When I think of a tight end in Brett Bielema's system, I had higher hopes. So I actually don't mind him moving on to the next level because I feel like his story of being a walk on who basically just developed under Brett to become a scholarship player, to become a starter in the Big Ten, and now hopefully get drafted in the NFL. That's a story we can pitch to the next guy in line, whether it be in the transfer portal or recruit, and that guy will have a higher ceiling to become the tight end that I think that this offense needs to thrive.
Right. I mean, I think of a guy like Henry Boyer. There's opportunity there for a guy like him. Um, it's all about how Brad Underwood can not Brad Underwood, good lord, Brett Bielema and his staff can progress these tight ends like they did with Tip. So I think it's going to be up to the coaching staff to keep developing these guys because that's kind of what Illinois has to be is a development style program, and then you possibly get a four-star tight end in there every now and then if the right situation is there. So I think that's going to be the key factor is how the next group develops. So we've seen this troubles in the secondary of how the next group develops. It's just all about what goes on there.
And Austin, before we go, I did want to get your thoughts on, I know you and I both agreed that Brett would have to kind of adjust his portal strategy this year compared to last year. And from the looks of it, it may not have changed too much. It still looks like we're kind of concentrating on the finding someone under the rock, just the JUCO level, the FCS level, while other people are chasing the previous four stars or the successful players. We seem to be looking for the guy who is a hidden talent. Maybe that's just what it is. That's just what our NIL funds are able to afford right now. But me personally, I'm a little disappointed that we haven't really been connected with any prominent names or even names I've heard of. And so I know you were even more vocal than I was about this. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, we've thrown offers out to like a defensive back at Ohio State, a Michigan State offensive lineman, a few things like that, Kansas State defensive back. But I think Brett and his staff maybe just think that this JUCO market is virtually untapped to the other teams in the conference, that this is the one area where Illinois can be elite at. And I know they've gotten the sacks leader in the JUCO. They've gotten the receiving touchdowns leader at the JUCO level. So they might think that this is a market deficiency. And this is the strategy going forward. I wish they would get into that higher end transfer market, of course, but at the same time, maybe it just takes a couple years, and maybe it just is a lot of bites at the apple, and then you get like a couple of huge gems out of that. So maybe that might be the strategy moving forward. I mean, there's got to be a reason behind the madness, and I'm hoping that that is just the case, instead of like just giving up on the Power 5 to Power 5 transfer level.
I mean, I think you're right. I think I have enough faith in Brett Bielema that I think the reason we're going down this route is kind of a Moneyball situation. Just trying to be find out where there's a market, efficiency to
What does he do? He gets on base.
exactly. Look, he may weigh 300 pounds and strike out 150 times, but he gets on base, and so it's he may feel like this market is kind of underutilized, and he's kind of going for those players because he knows next year, obviously, and moving forward, the Big Ten's just going to get tougher. And so, as long as we can establish ourselves as being, a bowl team. The NIL funds will slowly start creeping in, hopefully, and fans will kind of trust that the football team is not a waste of time, and that could kind of build up that war chest to have more notable players be interested, especially if we have the Tip Ryman stories, or the Isaiah Adams comes in the JUCO route and now he's going to get drafted in the NFL. Like that story's going to play to potential recruits, and so I'm still giving I wish he would do more, but at the same time I'll give him the benefit of the doubt for at least another year.
Sonny, it was an absolutely great show talking about Illinois and Florida Atlantic, and then previewing the Tennessee Volunteers as well. And then we talked a little bit of the line of football. So, Sonny, thank you for joining us again on the Illini cast, and I'll talk to you again next week.
Welcome back, Austin, and yeah, I can't wait.
All right. Thank you.